last time, we were looking at John Stuart Mill's attempt to reply to the critics of Bentham's utilitarianism. In his book, Utilitarianism, Mill tries to show that critics to the contrary, it is possible within the utilitarian framework to distinguish between higher and lower pleasures. It is possible to make qualitative distinctions of worth, and we tested that idea with the Simpsons and the Shakespeare excerpts. And the results of our experiment seem to call into question Mill's distinction, because a great many of you reported that you prefer the Simpsons, but that you still consider Shakespeare to be the higher or the worthier pleasure. That's the dilemma with which our experiment confronts Mill.Hello，
大家好，我是李恩。哇，今天又要继续我们的哈佛大学桑德尔教授的正义课第5堂啦。我呢知道很多朋友啊能够跟到第5堂都已经实属相当的不容易了。那么不用担心，我也简单的帮大家做一点总复习，好帮助我们今天进入第5课呢，有一个更清楚的轮廓。What's the right thing to do？ 这个正义课其实就是在讨论什么是道德嘛，就是我们该怎么做才是正确的，对吗？那怎么做才是正确的呢？这个桑德尔教授就举例，好比说电车事件，就是原本这个火车行驶在既定的道路上呢，发现前面呢会撞死5个人。如果这时候在来得及的情况下切换了这个轨道，可以只撞死一个原本不应该被撞死的无辜的人，那会不会愿意选择切换？好，还有就是像如果医生他正在救治一个患者，可是他发现有5个这个急症的患者突然呢跑到这个急诊室来，那医生该不该放下这个手边的患者？可是却知道如果一旦他放下了，这个患者会死亡。那他宁可让1个人死亡，反而来得及救其他的5个人。那该不该选择停下原本已经在救助的这个人，而去救新来的5个人呢？好，那如果这样是可以的话，那我现在医院里面有5个急需器官捐赠，否则就会立刻身亡的病患，我可以偷偷的麻醉一名健康的来看诊的患者呢，来偷摘他的人体器官，来救活其他5人呢？那我们是不是发现说，好像似乎有些东西就是在我们的道德感里头，我们不应该去选择，或者说不应该去让无辜的人莫名其妙遭受损失，对吗？那这就是所谓的功利主义的道德跟绝对道德的一个不同。绝对道德就是相信事物当中很多事情它是有绝对标准的，不论处在什么情况之下，都应该只有一个最正确的选择。那功利主义就是认为说，要以最大化的集体的幸福的结果为原则。如果可以救5个人的话，那么这个选择救5个人反而是比较合乎道德的。但是我们也知道说 Bentham 的这个模式呢，它就会有一个很严重的后果，就是它把人的幸福感呢，就全部统一用一个方式来量化。就像我们看到的船难事件，对吧？有4个人，他即将快要垂危的时候呢，他们就合伙起来杀死了船上唯一已经生重病而且呢生命垂危的青年男子，分食他的尸体，好让其他的人分食尸体之后而能够存活下来。那这样就合乎道德吗？所以如果只重集体，完全的漠视掉个人的话，好像这里面会有一种很恐怖的，可以说是宁可牺牲任何一个人的天赋人权，对吧？所以这也是为什么我们是不是到了第4堂课的时候，我们谈到了功利主义里头最后的一个改革派的大师，也就是 John Stuart Mill。 好，那 John Stuart Mill 呢，他就是改良了功利主义，他相信集体化的幸福呢仍然是最重要，只是呢每个人呢他都可以去经历去区分出说什么是对大众最有利的。就像我们讲，如果大家都同时知道说己所不欲勿施于人这道理的话，那么大家会更睿智的去选择说，我宁可饿肚子，我宁可饿自己，我也绝对不活吃人肉，这样的一个道理。John Stuart Mill 的功利主义呢，他就是认为说Bentham 的功利主义只偏重的是极大化每个人极大利益的一个数量，但是 Mill 呢，他反而比较重质量，他认为质量比数量更重要。也就是说，人们如果都能够做比较的时候，人们就能够更判断什么是更正确的事情去做。而这样的结果，当大多数人都有了比较的经验之后呢，大多数人选的东西才是更符合正确的道德价值，而我们可以去这个追求的。可是这个里头是不是我们又提到也有一个问题？什么问题？那就是 大家不可能什么事情都有经过比较才能去做出一个判断，对吧？就好像大多数的人上一次的这个课堂结尾都认为啊，辛普森家庭的卡通片比莎士比亚的戏剧还是要来的吸引人、有趣的许多。那如果大多数人都宁可选择比较低俗的文化或娱乐的话，那你怎么去界定说，难道这个就是不应该选择的呢？对吧？所以Jon Stewart 呢，他在这种集体式的幸福感的追求里头，他已经有他的挚爱难行的困难处。可是我们又会发现到 ，Jon Stewart 呢，越来越在集体的一个里头来讲，他越来越倾向于就是支持个人的自由，或者说个人的人权。也就是说 ，Jon Stewart 跟 Bentham 最大的不同就是 ，Jon Stewart 他比 Bentham 要来的更多的看重个人的选择。可是 Jon Stewart Mill 这样子仍然会遭受到批判，为什么？因为所谓的对大多数而言的选择结果是好的，可是对少部分而言，难道就没有无谓的牺牲或被剥夺吗？当然还是有啊，对不对？其实简单讲哈，就是 Jon Stewart Mill 呢，这种集体式的功利主义，它还是没有办法跳脱所谓的走向社会主义的一个模式，也就是遵循了多数人，但是你牺牲的少数人，难道这些人就不无辜吗？好，那么我们今天就是要来看，在这个功利主义的道德的另外一边的光谱，特别今天桑德尔教授要带我们讨论的是属于政治哲学的 libertarianism 主义，也就是自由意志主义者。今天我们可以好好的一起来认识 libertarianism 他们究竟是怎么样的一个思维，还有就是他们对Jon Stewart Mill 的批判又是什么？而他们是如何的主张人应该有最大的自由权？就让我们一起来看吧。Let's go.
What about Mill's attempt to account for the specially weighty character of individual rights and justice in Chapter 5 of Utilitarianism? He wants to say that individual rights are worthy of special respect.In fact, he goes so far as to say that justice is the most sacred part and the most incomparably binding part of morality. But the same challenge could be put to this part of Mill's defense. Why is justice the chief part and the most binding part of all morality? Well, he says because in the long run,if we do justice and if we respect rights, society as a whole will be better off in the long run. Well, what about that? What if we have a case where making an exception and violating individual rights actually will make people better off in the long run? Is it all right then to use people? And there's a further objection that could be raised against Mill's case for justice and rights. Suppose the utilitarian calculus in the long run works out as he says it will, such that respecting people's rights is a way of making everybody better off in the long run. Is that the right reason? Is that the only reason to respect people? If the doctor goes in and yanks the organs from the healthy patient who came in for a checkup,to save 5 lives, there would be adverse effects in the long run. Eventually, people would learn about this and would stop going in for checkups. Is it the right reason? Is the only reason that you as the doctor won't yank the organs out of the healthy patient?
Jon Stewart Mill 呢，他的模式就比较偏向规则的功利主义，就是 rule 的 utilitarianism， 就是说我们应该是有一种遵循某些可以带来最大幸福的规则，好，而不是针对每个行为单独的来评估。Jeremy Bentham 的行为功利主义就是 act utilitarianism 呢，他就像我们之前讲，哈，如果是一名医生，我该不该偷偷的麻醉一名健康的病患，活摘他的人体器官，然后去医治5名需要器官移植的这个病患？如果按照 Jeremy 的话呢，是可以这样做。为什么？因为这样对更多的人有好处，对吧？你救了5个人，虽然你无辜的杀死了一个健康的人，可是结果来看，你这个行为其实是可以被原谅，因为你的结果是对大众有好处。好，但是我们都知道，放在现在的尊重基本人权的角度来讲，怎么想都是错的，对吗？如果是 Jon Stewart Mill 呢，他就不会认为这样是对的。为什么？因为他会认为说， 如果每一个诊所的医生他都这样干，都用这种模式，就是说，我只要今天需要救治的人多，那我就随便去把一个这个健康人给杀掉。长期来看，整个社会就会陷入一种恐慌，大家都会选择再也不敢去看医生了。那长期来讲的话呢，对大多数人而言呢，有病却不去医，反而更容易无辜死掉更多的人。所以他认为长期来看，这个结果仍然是对大众来讲是不好的。所以你也可以说其实 John Stuart Mill 他的规则功利主义看的是确实是比较长远，那是因为他把人本的一个考量放进去的时候呢，结果的角度看的会比 Jeremy Bentham 的当下来得更长远。
That you think, well, if I use him in this way,in the long run, more lives will be lost? Or is there another reason, having to do with intrinsic respect for the person as an individual? And if that reason matters, then it's not so clear that even Mill's utilitarianism can take account of it. Fully to examine these two worries or objections to Mill's defense,We need to push further. And we need to ask, in the case of higher or worthier pleasures, are there theories of the good life that can provide independent moral standards for the worth of pleasures? If so, what do they look like? That's one question. In the case of justice and rights,If we suspect that Mill is implicitly leaning on notions of human dignity or respect for a person that are not, strictly speaking, utilitarian, we need to look to see whether there are some stronger theories of rights that can explain the intuition, which even Mill shares, the intuition that the reason for respecting individuals and not using them goes beyond even utility in the long run. Today we turn to one of those strong theories of rights. Strong theories of rights say individuals matter not just as instruments to be used for a larger social purpose or for the sake of maximizing utility. Individuals are separate beings with separate lives worthy of respect. And so it's a mistake, according to strong theories of rights, it's a mistake to think about justice or law by just adding up preferences and values. The strong rights theory we turn to today is libertarianism. Libertarianism takes individual rights seriously. It's called libertarianism because it says the fundamental individual right is the right to liberty. Precisely because we are separate individual beings, we're not available to any use that the society might desire or devise. Precisely because we are individual, separate human beings, we have a fundamental right to liberty. And that means a right to choose freely, to live our lives as we please, provided we respect other people's rights to do the same. That's the fundamental idea. Robert Nozick, one of the libertarian philosophers we read for this course, puts it this way: individuals have rights. So strong and far-reaching are these rights that they raise the question of what, if anything, the state may do. So what does libertarianism say about the role of government or of the state? Well, there are three things that most modern states do that, on the libertarian theory of rights, are illegitimate, are unjust. One of them is paternalist legislation. That's passing laws that protect people from themselves. seatbelt laws, for example, or motorcycle helmet laws. The libertarian says it may be a good thing if people wear seatbelts, but that should be up to them. And the state, the government, has no business coercing them, us, to wear seatbelts by law. It's coercion. So no paternalist legislation, number one. Number two, no morals legislation. Many laws try to promote the virtue of citizens or try to give expression to the moral values of the society as a whole. Libertarians say that's also a violation of the right to liberty. Take the example of, well, a classic example of legislation offered in the name of promoting morality, traditionally, have been laws that prevent sexual intimacy between gays and lesbians. The libertarian says, nobody else is harmed, nobody else's rights are violated, so the state should get out of the business entirely of trying to promote virtue or to enact morals legislation. And the third kind of law or policy that is ruled out on the libertarian philosophy is any taxation or other policy that serves the purpose of redistributing income or wealth from the rich to the poor. Redistribution is a kind, if you think about it, says the libertarian, is a kind of coercion. What it amounts to is theft by the state or by the majority, if we're talking about a democracy, from people who happen to do very well and earn a lot of money. Now, Nozick and other libertarians allow that there can be a minimal state that taxes people for the sake of what everybody needs, the national defense, police force, judicial system to enforce contracts and property rights. But that's it. Now, I want to get your reactions to this third feature of the libertarian view. I want to see who among you agree with that idea and who disagree and why. But just to make it concrete and to see what's at stake, consider the distribution of wealth in the United States. The United States is among the most inegalitarian societies as far as the distribution of wealth of all the advanced democracies. Now, is this just or unjust? Well, what does the libertarian say? Libertarian says, you can't know just from the facts I've just given you. You can't know whether that distribution is just or unjust. You can't know just by looking at a pattern or a distribution or a result whether it's just or unjust. You have to know how it came to be. You can't just look at the end state or the result. You have to look at two principles. The first he calls justice in acquisition, or in initial holdings. And what that means simply is, did people get the things they used to make their money fairly? So we need to know, was there justice in the initial holdings? Did they steal the land or the factory or the goods that enabled them to make all that money? If not, if they were entitled to whatever it was that enabled them to gather the wealth, the first principle is met. The second principle is, did the distribution arise from the operation of free consent? People buying and trading on the market. As you can see, the libertarian idea of justice corresponds to a free market conception of justice. Provided people got what they used fairly, didn't steal it, and provided the distribution results from the free choice of individuals buying and selling things, the distribution is just. And if not, it's unjust. So let's, in order to fix ideas for this discussion, take an actual example. Who's the wealthiest person in the United States? Wealthiest person in the world? Bill Gates. It is. That's right. Here he is. You'd be happy too. Now, what's his net worth? Anybody have any idea? That's a big number. During the Clinton years, remember there was a controversy. Donors, big campaign contributors, were invited to stay overnight in the Lincoln bedroom at the White House. I think if you contributed $25,000 or above, someone figured out at the median contribution that got you invited to stay a night in the Lincoln bedroom, Bill Gates could afford to stay in the Lincoln bedroom every night for the next 66,000 years. Somebody else figured out, how much does he get paid on an hourly basis? And so they figured out, since he began Microsoft, suppose he worked, 14 hours per day. Reasonable guess. And you calculate this net wealth. It turns out that his rate of pay is over $150, not per hour, not per minute, $150, more than $150 per second. Which means that if on his way to the office, Gates noticed a $100 bill on the street, it wouldn't be worth his time to stop and pick it up. Now, most of you will say, someone that wealthy, surely we can tax them to meet the pressing needs of people who lack an education or lack enough to eat or lack decent housing. They need it more than he does. And if you were a utilitarian, what would you do? What tax policy would you have? You'd redistribute in a flash, wouldn't you? Because you would know, being a good utilitarian, that taking a small amount, he's scarcely going to notice it, but it will make a huge improvement in the lives and in the welfare of those at the bottom.
我们可以简单的说，过去功利主义的大师 Jeremy Bentham 呢，他其实是一种行为的功利主义啊，就是说我们一切看行为所导致的结果，对大多数是好是坏，那么只要是好的，那个就不会有错。好，其实放在政治来讲，坦白说了哈，我可以给大家一个逻辑，就是那这个就会比较慢慢偏向的是什么？就很像共产主义嘛。好，就是说大多数人都得到益处了，那我们是不是可以剥夺少部分人，好比说特别有钱人的财产，我们来做财富重分配，对吧？因为大多数人可以感受到更幸福。
But remember, the libertarian theory says we can't just add up and aggregate preferences and satisfactions that way. We have to respect persons, and if he earned that money fairly, without violating anybody else's rights, in accordance with the two principles of justice in acquisition and justice in transfer, then it would be wrong, it would be a form of coercion to take it away. Michael Jordan is not as wealthy as Bill Gates, but he did pretty well for himself. You want to see Michael Jordan? There he is. His income alone in 1 year was $31 million, and then he made another $47 million in endorsements for Nike and other companies. So his income was, in 1 year, $78 million. To require him to pay, let's say, a third of his earnings to the government to support good causes like food and health care and housing and education for the poor, that's coercion. That's unjust. That violates his rights. And that's why redistribution is wrong. Now, how many agree with that argument? Agree with the libertarian argument that redistribution for the sake of trying to help the poor is wrong? And how many disagree with that argument? All right, let's begin with those who disagree. What's wrong with the libertarian case against redistribution? Yes.
I think these people like Michael Jordan have received, we're talking about working within a society, and they received a larger gift from the society, and they have a larger obligation in return to give that through redistribution. You know, you can say that Michael Jordan may work just as hard as someone who works, you know, doing laundry 12 hours, 14 hours a day, but he's receiving more. I don't think it's fair to say that, you know, it's all on his, you know, inherent, you know, hard work.
All right. Let's hear from defenders of libertarianism. Why would it be wrong in principle to tax the rich to help the poor? Go ahead.
My name's Joe, and I collect skateboards. I've since bought 100 skateboards. I live in a society of 100 people. I'm the only one with skateboards. Suddenly, everyone decides they want a skateboard. They come into my house, they take 99 of my skateboards. I think that is unjust. Now, I think in certain circumstances, it becomes necessary to overlook that injustice, perhaps condone that injustice, as in the case of the cabin boy being killed for food. If people are on the verge of dying, perhaps it is necessary to overlook that injustice, but I think it's important to keep in mind that we're still committing injustice by taking people's belongings or assets.
Are you saying that taxing Michael Jordan, say at a 33% tax rate, for good causes, to feed the hungry, is theft?
I think it's unjust. Yes, I do believe it's theft, but perhaps it is necessary to condone that theft.
But it's theft.
Yes.
Why is it theft, Joe?
Because
Why is it like your collection of skateboards?
it's theft because, at least in my opinion and by the libertarian opinion, he earned that money fairly, and it belongs to him. So to take it from him is by definition theft.
All right, let's hear if there's... who wants to reply to Joe? Yes, go ahead.
I don't think this is necessarily a case in which you have 99 skateboards and the government, or you have 100 skateboards and the government's taking 99 of them. It's like you have more skateboards than there are days in a year. You have more skateboards than you're going to be able to use in your entire lifetime, and the government is taking part of those. And I think that if you're operating in a society in which the government doesn't redistribute wealth, that allows for people to amass so much wealth that people who haven't started from the equal footing in our hypothetical situation that doesn't exist in our real society get undercut for the rest of their lives.
So you're worried that if there isn't some degree of redistribution, if some are left at the bottom, there will be no genuine equality of opportunity. All right? The idea that taxation is theft. Nozick takes that point one step further. He agrees that it's theft. He's more demanding than Joe. Joe says it is theft. Maybe in an extreme case it's justified. Maybe a parent is justified in stealing a loaf of bread to feed his or her hungry family. So Joe is what would you call yourself, a compassionate quasi-libertarian? Nozick says, if you think about it, taxation amounts to the taking of earnings. In other words, it means taking the fruits of my labor. But if the state has the right to take my earnings or the fruits of my labor, isn't that morally the same as, according to the state, the right to claim a portion of my labor? So taxation actually is morally equivalent to forced labor, because forced labor involves the taking of my leisure, my time, my efforts, just as taxation takes the earnings that I make with my labor. And so for Nozick and for the libertarians, taxation for redistribution is theft, as Joe says, but not only theft, it's morally equivalent to laying claim to certain hours of a person's life and labor. So it's morally equivalent to forced labor. If the state has a right to claim the fruits of my labor, that implies that it really has an entitlement to my labor itself. And what is forced labor? Forced labor, Nozick points out, is what? Is slavery. Because if I don't have the right, the sole right, to my own labor, then that's really to say that the government or the political community is a part owner in me. And what does it mean for the state to be a part owner in me? If you think about it, it means that I'm a slave, that I don't own myself. So what this line of reasoning brings us to is the fundamental principle that underlies the libertarian case for rights. What is that principle? It's the idea that I own myself. It's the idea of self-possession. If you want to take rights seriously, if you don't want to just regard people as collections of preferences, the fundamental moral idea to which you will be led is the idea that we are the owners or the proprietors of our own person. And that's why utilitarianism goes wrong. And that's why it's wrong to yank the organs from that healthy patient. You're acting as if that patient belongs to you or to the community, but we belong to ourselves. And that's the same reason that it's wrong to make laws to protect us from ourselves, or to tell us how to live, to tell us what virtues we should be governed by. And that's also why it's wrong to tax the rich, to help the poor, even for good causes, even to help those who were displaced by the Hurricane Katrina. Ask them to give charity. But if you tax them, it's like forcing them to labor. Could you tell Michael Jordan he has to skip the next week's games and go down to help the people displaced by Hurricane Katrina? Morally, it's the same. So the stakes are very high. So far, we've heard some objections to the libertarian argument, but if you want to reject it, you have to break into this chain of reasoning, which goes, taking my earnings is like taking my labor, but taking my labor is making me a slave. And if you disagree with that, you must believe in the principle of self-possession. Those who disagree, gather your objections, and we'll begin with them next time.
好，那我们看完了，那我们有没有发现到这一集很精彩的地方是什么？就是我们从最早这个道德律来看，什么事情是合乎正确去做的。没想到啊，道德落实到所谓政治当中的时候呢， 它是不是就让我们看出一个影子的轮廓？也就是功利主义道德这边其实会发展成所谓社会主义。好，那再极端一点就是共产主义了。也就是说，所谓群体幸福感呢远大于个人。更极端的一种就是甚至可以剥夺了所谓个人的自由或者说个人的权利。那今天所学到的这个 libertarianism 呢，也就是自由意志主义呢，它其实就是偏向发展到所谓的资本主义。资本主义里头它有2大前提，一个就是私有财，好，那另外一个就是法治。也就是说每个人他都应该是公平的透过他自己的劳动，而他的财富呢就可以完全的归个人所有。那这个劳动包含的是个人的自主权。所以你会发现到说 libertarianism 它是不是就慢慢偏向右派的这边所谓的小政府主义，就是政府它应该缩小自己的权利，不过度的去干涉人们。当然你说在这个偏右的 libertarianism 它跟我们讲的政治光谱里头的这个中间偏右的 conservative 保守主义有什么不同呢？那其实坦白说还是有的，因为 libertarianism 呢跟 conservative 呢在以后我们谈到的这一个道德价值里头的时候呢会有一些分别。也就是说天赋人权这个概念，那前提是你相不相信上帝是那个道德的最高原则或者说最高指标。如果只有单纯一味的崇尚个人自由的话，那某种程度上偏比较极端的就会出现，好比说我们刚刚看到一些例子，就是 libertarianism 有的他就会主张说政府连人民开车该不该系安全带呢，你都不可以用这种家长式的 parental 来制定法律，所以他们反对家长式的法律。那这个部分呢就确实还是会跟 conservative 保守主义呢会有一些分歧，但是大体而言，特别是财务自由、个人的劳动自由、劳动所得自由来讲的话，这点的重叠性是非常非常高的。所以为什么像美国在右派，在美国在共和党来讲，有一些人士他甚至是认为说政府是完全应该免税的这样的一个主张，就是说政府的收入来源只能够对于他国贸易的这个关税来收取，而应该全面消除所有的所谓的个人所得税。大家这样了解我意思吗？就是因为他们认为说，如果一旦你政府对我个人课税的话呢，那你是不是在剥夺我的劳动所得？等于你强迫我要义务免费的帮政府劳动多久多久。好，那你有时候会觉得这个想法是不是有点太过极端？难道政府课给你一个 10% 20% 的税来讲就很过分吗？政府也是要营运啊，对不对？好，不过呢这个就是看法的不同，因为确实政府它可以达到税收的方式呢很多。那有人就认为说，你如果今天你可以课我 10% 20%， 那你是不是也可以课我 40% 50%？ 那你换个角度想，你可以说等于就是卖给政府，或者说帮政府为奴了。
那你是想站着还是想挣钱呢？我是想站着还把钱挣了。
所以这就是刚刚桑德尔老师讲的这一种自由意志主义者 libertarianism 他的一个思维的模式。所以站在个人自由面前，他们是非常非常崇尚的。好，那今天谈的东西是放在了实用性的这个政治哲学里头来探讨。我觉得今天这一集呢非常的有意思。OK， 好不容易把我们第5集分享出来，那希望下一次第6讲的课程呢，好不好？不会等太久。我们这边是超级神队友，我们就下部影片再见啦，拜拜。
Anyone like to take up that point? Yes.
I feel like when you live in a society, you give up that right. I mean, technically, if I want to personally go out and kill someone because they offend me, that is self-possession. Because I live in a society, I cannot do that.
Victoria, are you questioning the fundamental premise of self-possession?
Yes. I think that you don't really have self-possession if you choose to live in a society because you cannot just discount the people around you.
This we know, the cornerstone is Christ alone, our hope now forever.